My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, my project partner, lit up the screen. Working late? Need anything? S. I stared at it, the letters blurring. Sarah never worked past 5 p.m. She had quit 2 months ago after the incident in the basement. Something she never talked about. Something the HR department filed away under confidential. I remembered the rumor. A co-worker had fallen from the loading dock after a night shift. His body never found. The footage corrupted. The building had been sealed for a week, then reopened. Sarah had been the one who pushed the "no one will notice" memo that got us both pulling the last quarter's numbers together. A sudden thump reverberated from the far end of the hallway. I spun, heart a drum in my ears. The motion sensor panel flickered, the green dot turning red, then flashing amber. "Unauthorized presence detected," a robotic voice intoned over the speaker system. The voice was flat, emotionless, but its timing was too precise. I moved toward the source, the hallway now a long, narrow canyon of sound. The motion sensors on the wall lit up sequentially, as if someone, or something, was walking just ahead of me, a ghost in the circuitry that anticipated my steps. I reached the door to the basement. It was usually locked, a biometric scanner at the keypad. The panel was dark, the screen cracked, the indicator light dead. I pressed my palm against the scanner, the green light flaring weakly, and the door clicked open with a low, metallic sigh. The basement was a sprawling maze of storage rooms, filing cabinets, and the old server racks that hadn't been decommissioned yet. The air here smelled of dust and a faint metallic tang. My phone's flashlight cut a thin cone through the gloom. The motion sensors on the walls were dark. The system seemed to be failing, as if the building itself was losing its own vigilance. I heard a soft shuffling, the sound of a rubber-soled shoe on concrete. I turned, and there, standing at the far end, was a figure in a navy blue blazer, my company's standard attire. His face was obscured by a shadowed hood, but his posture was familiar. The way he hunched when he reached for a file, the way he held his coffee cup with a careless grip. I realized, with a cold surge, that it was my own reflection, but older. Older by a decade, eyes sunken, skin pallid. He didn't move. I could see the faint outline of his ID badge, the same one that hung on my chest. The badge read E. Miller, Senior Analyst. I was the senior analyst. The badge flickered, the light dying, then igniting again as if a breath passed through it. "Don't leave." The whisper came again, this time from his mouth, a thin, ragged sound that seemed to echo off the concrete walls. It was not a request. It was a command, an instruction that curled around my spine. I backed away, heart pounding, but the hallway collapsed behind me. The doors slammed shut, the fluorescent lights sputtering out, plunging the basement into darkness save for the intermittent glow of my phone. My breath came in ragged bursts, each exhale a foggy plume that dissolved into the stale air. Then the security footage on my handheld tablet, one I kept as a backup, flickered to life. It showed the live feed from the building's main corridor, but the timestamp read 6:58 p.m., an hour before I had entered the office. The hallway was empty, the green dot static. Then a figure appeared, walking the length of the hall, moving in perfect sync with the motion sensor's activation. It was me, or rather a version of me, wearing the same blazer, the same tired eyes, the same haunted expression. It paused at the conference room door, placed a hand on the handle, and turned to look directly at the camera. Its gaze was empty, a hollow that seemed to drink in the light. The feed cut just as the figure stepped into the room. The screen went black, a single line of text scrawled across in white. "Process complete." I dropped the tablet. The metallic clang resonated like a gavel. The building's alarms began to chirp, a low, repetitive beeping that seemed to come from the very walls. A voice over the intercom, garbled and distant, whispered, "All data archived. All personnel accounted for." Good night, I stood there, trembling, in a place that felt both familiar and alien, the weight of the building pressing down on me like an unseen hand. I thought about the reports I'd been compiling, the numbers that meant so much in the daylight. In the darkness, they were just a pattern, a code waiting to be completed. I left the basement, the door slamming shut behind me as if it had never been opened. The hallway lights flickered back to life, the motion sensors chimed in a steady rhythm, and the security console returned to its bland, all zones clear status. I walked back to my desk, the empty office now a sanctuary of ordinary machinery. Story 1. When the lights flickered out at 7 p.m., the whole building seemed to exhale. The hum of the HVAC steadied into a low, reverberant thrum, and the glass facade of the headquarters reflected a bruised sunset that turned the lobby into a shallow pool of gold. I lingered at my desk, a lone island of fluorescent glare in the cavernous open-plan office, because the deadline for the quarterly report wouldn't wait for the sun to set. The cleaning crew had already gone, the coffee machine was silent, and the only other sounds were the occasional clang of a distant elevator shaft and the soft, rhythmic beeping of the motion sensors that lined the hallway outside my cubicle. The building's security system was designed to be invisible, just a network of infrared emitters and cameras that logged every movement, every whisper of light. In the daylight, they were invisible, but after hours they were a presence you could feel, like an extra set of eyes just beyond the periphery. I glanced at my watch, 7:37. A quick glance at the security console on my second monitor showed a clean line. All zones clear. I breathed out, a thin sigh that seemed louder than it should have been in the empty space. I turned back to my spreadsheet, the numbers blurring into a monotone chant as I typed. A soft click echoed down the hallway. The motion sensor panel lit up a single green dot, Zone C. It was the corridor that ran past the conference rooms, the one I used to walk through on my way to the break room. No one else was supposed to be there. I felt the hair on the back of my neck rise. Probably the night shift security guard, I muttered to myself, though I knew that the guard never came on until 10 p.m., and his route bypassed Zone C entirely. I told myself there was a logical explanation for every phantom footstep, for every flicker in the fluorescent tubes. I was a data analyst, not a storyteller. A few minutes later, the same green dot pulsed again. Then the red light on the panel blinked. A breach. The system logged motion detected, 7:40 p.m., Corridor West. I stared at the screen. The live feed from the camera overlooking the corridor was grainy, the night vision overlay painting everything in an eerie green wash. The frame was empty, just the endless stretch of carpet and the occasional fluorescent tube casting a harsh line across the tiles. I clicked on the playback button, replaying the last 30 seconds. As the grainy footage rolled forward, something caught my eye. A silhouette, faint but unmistakable, moving slowly down the hallway. It was too slow to be a person walking. It seemed to glide, shoulders hunched, head turned slightly as if listening. At the 20-second mark, the figure paused, turned toward the camera, and nothing. The image just held static, the green overlay smearing the darkness. Then the footage cut, the monitor flashing a brief no signal before returning to the live feed. My heart thudded louder than the HVAC. I rubbed my eyes, wiped the screen with the back of my hand. The camera showed only the empty hallway again. I should have called the security desk, but the desk was empty. The phone line dead, a do not disturb sign glowing red on the screen. I stood up, the chair squeaking in protest, and stepped out of my cubicle. The hallway smelled faintly of stale coffee and ozone. The motion sensor's faint beeping morphed into a soft, almost inaudible whir as I passed them. My shoes clicked against the polished tiles. The green dot on the panel stayed lit, a steady sentinel watching my every step. Halfway down the corridor, the lights flickered. For a heartbeat, the entire hallway sank into black. Then the fluorescence sputtered back to life, half lit like a wounded animal. In that brief darkness, I thought I heard a whisper, a breathy syllable that seemed to come from the wall itself. Don't. It stopped as abruptly as it had begun. When I turned the corner, The conference room doors were ajar. I never used those rooms after hours. They were always locked. The keycards deactivated at 6 p.m. The faint glow from inside the room spilled onto the floor, revealing an empty table set up for a meeting that never happened. A lone coffee mug sat atop a stack of reports, steam still curling up as if someone had just placed it there. I approached the table, my breath fogging the glass of the window that faced the city's skyline, an ocean of dimly lit windows, other buildings like me, all sleeping. When I finally left the building at 9 p.m., the parking lot was empty, the sky a bruised violet. My car's engine started with a reluctant growl, and the headlights cut through the night like knives. I glanced at my watch. 8:58 p.m. I had not been here for an hour. The report was still half finished, the data unfinished, the terror unfinished. And in the rearview mirror, the office lights flickered one last time, a green dot pulsing in the darkness, as if the building were breathing, waiting for the next night. I drove away, the weight of the building's unseen gaze still on my shoulders. I knew I would return tomorrow, because I was paid to finish the reports, to make the numbers clean. But somewhere deep in the circuitry of the office, the motion sensors were already counting down, waiting for the next time I would stay after hours, waiting for the next moment when the hallway would remember that someone who shouldn't be there had walked through it. Story 2. I've always liked the hush that settles over the 28th-floor glass tower when the city lights dim and the elevators stop their endless chatter. The office feels clean, like a hospital after the last patient has been discharged. That's why they let me stay late. The IT department needs someone to watch the servers while the rest of the company dreams about quarterly bonuses. It started on a Tuesday, 2 weeks after the new motion sensor system went live. I was alone in the dim glow of my workstation, a single desk lamp cutting a cone of amber across the sea of empty cubicles. My laptop hummed, my coffee steamed, and the faint tick of the building's automated ventilation was the only other sound. At 11:07 p.m., the ceiling-mounted sensor over the break room flickered. A soft, almost polite click announced that someone, or something, had entered the room. I glanced at the monitor that displayed the sensor's status. Movement detected, Zone B, 11:07 p.m. My eyes flicked to the break room's glass wall. Nothing moved. No shadows. The coffee machine was still warm, its drip tray empty. I told myself it was a glitch. The system was brand new. The engineers had warned us about occasional false positives. I went back to my code. The sensor pinged again at 11:12, this time in the hallway near the fire escape. The message on the display read, "Unauthorized entry, Zone C, 11:12 p.m. My heart thudded. The hallway lights were dimmed to a low energy setting, but a faint, steady buzz pulsed from the fluorescent tubes. I stood, grabbed my coat, and stepped out of my cubicle. The hallway was empty, the carpet a perfect plane. The motion sensors were ceiling mounted, invisible until they glowed green. I tried the fire escape door, locked, as always after hours. The security badge reader flashed red. Behind me, the quiet hum of the servers seemed louder, more oppressive. When I turned back toward the break room, the glass wall was covered in a faint condensation that hadn't been there a minute ago. I could see the silhouette of a man standing by the coffee machine, his outline blurry, as if the world was underwater. He turned his head toward me, but his face was a smear of white light. No features, just a void. "Hey!" I called, my voice sounding thin in the empty space. No answer, just the low whir of the ventilation system swallowing my words. I stepped closer, the floor tiles cool under my shoes, and the condensation on the glass rippled as if something brushed against it from the other side. The figure didn't move. The sensor on the break room stopped flashing. The monitor on my laptop, which had been displaying a live feed of the security cameras in the building, froze on a frame of the hallway. The timestamp read 11:13 p.m., but the image was static, the hallway empty, the only movement the slow drip of water from a leaky pipe in the corner. I stared, bewildered, until a soft chime sounded from the speaker system. "Security alert. Unauthorized presence detected in Zone B." My breath came in shallow bursts. I fumbled for the intercom, hit the button, and whispered, "Hello? Security?" Silence. Then a faint voice, distant and distorted, crackled. "No one is supposed to be here." The monitors shifted. The camera feed of the break room showed a different angle. My own desk, my own reflection in the dark screen. The motion sensor indicator in Zone B pulsed again, but this time it was accompanied by a faint, rhythmic tapping sound, like a keyboard being pressed in rapid succession, though my hands were still on the desk. I felt an invisible weight settle on my shoulders. My mind raced. Perhaps a coworker had stayed late. Maybe Jason from accounting, who always boasted about pulling all-nighters. I checked the employee log. Jason's badge was recorded in at 8:45 a.m., logged out at 5:30 p.m. Then, nothing. No after-hours entry. I tried to leave, but the elevators refused to respond to the call button. The out-of-service sign blinked in red, and the sound of a distant metallic grinding filled the shaft. The hallway lights flickered, then steadied on a low, amber hue that made the shadows look like deep bruises on the walls. The motion sensor over the conference room, which was directly above my floor, began to chirp. A new message appeared. "Meeting in progress, 12 a.m. I stared at the ceiling, trying to locate a source for the sound I could not hear. Somewhere above, a conference room, unused after 7 p.m., was apparently hosting a gathering. I climbed the narrow service stairs, each step echoing in a way that made the building feel alive, like a heart beating in a chest. The fire escape door, stubbornly locked earlier, now stood ajar, a thin sliver of darkness beyond it. I pushed it open, half expecting a gust of cold night air. Instead, a faint fluorescent glow spilled out, illuminating a long, empty hallway lined with closed doors. The motion sensors on this floor flickered as I passed, each one briefly turning green before dimming again. At the end of the hallway, a door with a glass panel stood slightly ajar. Inside, the conference room was lit by an overhead projector, the screen casting a pale, static-filled image of the building's floor plan. The projection was older than the building. The layout showed a wing that never existed in the blueprints I'd seen. A name glowed in the corner. G. Miller, Project Eclipse. No one in the company had ever mentioned a Miller, nor an Eclipse project. I stepped closer, and the static resolved into a grainy video feed. It was a recording of me, my own desk, my own face, eyes wide, as I stared at the screen. The timestamp was 10:45 p.m., 30 minutes before I had even arrived. A voice, soft and distorted, whispered from the speakers, "You're not supposed to be here, Alex." The name on the screen was my own. I spun around, heart hammering, and the hallway behind me was empty. I heard the click of a keyboard again, faster this time, as if someone was typing a frantic report. The motion sensor over the hallway near the break room lit up. Again, green. I ran back to my desk, mind a tangled knot of dread. The server rack in front of me seemed to hum louder, the LEDs blinking in patterns that resembled a pulse. On the monitor, the live security feed of the parking garage showed a car pulling into the lot. My company's leased vehicle, but the license plate was missing. The camera rotated, focusing on a lone figure walking toward the building, its outline flickering like a bad signal. I tried to shut the computer down, but the power button did nothing. The building's PA system crackled, and a voice that sounded like my own, yet not, said, "We're ready, Alex." The night is long. A cold draft brushed my neck. I turned, expecting to see a coworker, perhaps a late-night auditor, but the hallway was empty. The motion sensor over my cubicle lit up, green, then turned red, flashing security breach. My badge scanner on the desk, which I never used, lit up with a blinking red light, as if trying to read a badge that wasn't there. The lights in the building started to dim, one floor at a time, until only the floor I was on remained lit, a sickly amber that made the shadows on the walls look like hands reaching out. I could hear faint footsteps behind me, soft, deliberate, the sound of shoes on carpet. But when I turned, there was only my own reflection in the dark monitor, eyes wide, pupils blown. I knew the building would be empty come morning. The security cameras would replay hours of footage, showing no one but me. Yet somewhere, deep in the server logs, a new entry would appear. User, G. Miller. Access granted. I had never met a Miller, never known an eclipse, and now the building seemed to have a memory of something I could not grasp. The motion sensor over the break room clicked once, a final solitary beep. The hallway lights went out, and the building fell into an oppressive darkness, broken only by the faint glow of the server LEDs, like stars in a night sky. I sit here now, the only sound the low whir of the fans. I keep my eyes on the monitor, waiting for something to change, for the motion sensors to flash, for the next anomalous entry in the log. The building is still, but I know it is listening. If you ever have to stay late in a corporate tower, remember, the lights may be off, the doors may be locked, but the sensors never forget, and sometimes they remember someone who never existed.